In today's episode of the Pathmonk Presents podcast, I got a very interesting guest here with me today. I'm with Eric Green, who's hailing over from Chain.io. And basically, if you head over to the page, you will see that they help you with faster integrations that drive more resilient supply chains, right? So it's a very interesting solution, basically, that allow for advanced integrations for a basically more scalable, functional supply chain infrastructure. And that's what we're really going to be talking about, and specifically how we're thinking about growth, right, in that particular scenario. So, Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Lucas.
Very good. So, basically give people maybe a quick overview. What is Chain.io all about?
Yeah, Chain.io, we started 6 years ago. Our founder, Brian Glick, was at a freight forwarder and saw a problem of integrating software platforms. So while he was there, he was head of IT, and he was constantly challenged with integrating new supply chain softwares for the freight forward community. And so what his vision was could you create a common data platform where you could receive source data, normalize it, and get it out to a destination software, and be a real integration software platform that's really highly focused on supply chain, so that we knew all the terminology and we knew all of the pain points of supply chain, but make that data translation much easier for freight forwarders, for their shipper clients, and then for the software companies that integrate.
That makes a lot of sense. So can you give folks maybe a little bit of an insight as to sort of what organizations you would be working with? Like, who's sort of like a sweet spot customer?
We really serve the three different stakeholders in the industry. We began with freight forwarders because that's really where from which Brian came. And a freight forwarder, for those maybe in the audience that aren't as familiar, this is the agents of the travel agents of supplies that move around the world. So they're getting supplies from a manufacturing facility in Asia, for example, on a truck into an ocean container, overseas, then into distribution. So they're managing that whole process of getting something from point A to ultimately, point Z or further. And so those freight forwarders were our initial clients. But as we started to provide services and data integration layers for the freight forwarders, the shippers, who were their customers, were saying, well, could you also integrate internally to my systems? Or could you integrate to another software platform that I have? So shipper clients became a great path of growth, and we'll talk about growth in a bit. But then there's also the technology companies. So the people, as an example, that are providing carbon emissions data. So they're wanting to connect in with the freight forwarders and wanting to provide their information ultimately to the shippers. So you get this kind of ecosystem that builds on itself. And again, we'll talk about growth and how we're getting it. But we really served freight forwarders first, and that branched out into shippers and supply chain. Into the software companies.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, how would you say, sort of in that sort of interesting infrastructure, how do people hear about Chain.io? Like, what's their typical journey like of getting started?
Well, I'm particularly proud of our founder, because he's a savant in a lot of ways. So he's a software developer by trade, but he knows this industry. He's been in it for 25 years. So I think one of the places where we get most of our, not most, but a lot of our leads is his thought leadership. And his thinking about, could we as an industry really unite, and could Chain be at the center of that unification? So he speaks a lot, he writes a lot, and if you go to our website, you'll see there. And we're trying to build content that's thoughtful and meaningful to our end customer about how they can make their supply chains more robust. The second piece is, we mentioned the network effect. So we get one freight forwarder client that's serving a shipper. Well, that shipper may want us to connect systems internally or to another freight forwarder, as an example. And then, of course, we have all the traditional marketing things that you're so great at, all the outbound motion that you would expect with account-based marketing, et cetera. But the nice thing about this model is that once you're able to connect a source file to a destination file and Chain be in the middle of that, all of a sudden that destination file is used by many different companies. And so they could choose to directly connect, or they can come into the Chain platform and very easily connect. You're taking an integration that may take months down to weeks.
That makes a whole lot of sense. Very cool. So now, maybe let's talk a bit about the website. Like, what role do you think the website plays in their journey?
Yeah, I think the website, it has a technical bent because we're a technical type of company. But the part I am most proud of, and I have it here on my other screen here, is if you go to some of our customer stories, that's highlighted at the top, it'll help you to understand the ease with which companies can get data and data in a place and integrate it very quickly and seamlessly. And our solutions, I love the solutions page because that's ultimately what we do. It's what data and information do you really need? If it's carbon, if it's milestones, if it's whatever that information is along the supply chain, and we can get that into whatever technology format you need. So I love the solutions page, and I've learned a lot about supply chain. It's something like crazy, Lucas, that for one shipment to get from Asia into North America, about over 100 companies touch that particular delivery, and exchanging of information is all along that journey. And it's just crazy how complex it is. And we're trying to make that a little bit more simplified.
Very cool. That makes a whole lot of sense. Now, maybe let's talk a little bit about your role, right? You're a chief operating officer. Maybe share with people a little bit about sort of what does that role entail? What does it mean at Chain.io?
Yeah, so I came in titled COO. I also provide CFO type role and function as well. It's not necessarily my title, but I came in to really understand the business and the drivers of that business. And in the operations role, where I'm spending most of my time is making sure client success is served well. Now, we have a client success team that's run by an unbelievable supply chain expert named Morgan Jones. He's awesome. But I'm thinking about day in and day out, what are our clients and customers' needs? Where can we better serve them? And how do we internally operate to make sure that we're a delivery focused type of company that's accountable to make the supply chain infrastructure on our client side more reliable, accountable, and flexible so that they can grow and solve business problems. They don't have to solve data problems. Is that clear?
Yep, that makes a whole lot of sense. Now, I would like to switch gears a little bit and talk sort of as we slowly moving towards the end of the interview, throw some rapid fire questions at you to get to know a little bit more about your journey.
Okay.
Very good. So maybe tell us at first sort of what would be a recent book or recent podcast you've been sort of reading or listening to?
I'm infatuated with this writer that wrote Atomic Habits. And it's the context of it. Have you ever heard of it, Lucas? Atomic Habits, the book?
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I just love this incrementally getting better, right? Don't take on these huge challenges and try to boil the ocean, so the metaphor goes. Make incremental improvements every day. And I think we try to do that at our company. I certainly try to do that personally, and I try to imbue that on my three children, that you don't have to make huge strides to make a lifetime of a big stride. So that was the last book, and I keep up with them, going on and on.
What would be the one single thing that Chain.io is focused on the most about?
It's all about the customer. We can talk about data. We use words like canonical data model and integrations and everything, but where we really focus our attention is what business problem are we solving? Can we be maniacal about helping our clients understand what they're trying to do? And, I come from a finance background, so a lot of our interactions with supply chain experts and IT people because of where we are in that ecosystem. But, if I can save someone, a shipper client, a quarter of a day of inventories, days inventory outstanding, I've made a real business impact. Now, it's not because of us, but if we can be an enabler of efficiency in someone's supply chain, then we're really solving a business problem. And that's what really kind of gets me fired up and where we're maniacal.
That sounds really good. So next question. If you would have a magic wand as a COO, what's the one single thing that you would change? Maybe a piece of technology, maybe a problem you want to get solved?
I think, this may sound a little strange. You probably don't need a magic wand, but I think the world post-pandemic has been isolating in a lot of ways, and we're not out on the road. We're not seeing our clients as much as a broad base. We do a lot more of these Zoom calls, which is great. But I'm maybe old school. I want to be back in the office. I want to be back on the road. I want to be understanding the problems that our clients are trying to solve and be part of that solution. So that's not necessarily a wand, but I just feel like there's been a slight cultural shift broadly since pandemic. I don't know if you would agree with me or not.
No, I think it makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, it makes a whole lot of, it's an experience, right? It's not just the screen typically.
I'm old, Lucas. You can, yeah.
I think it makes a whole lot of sense. Very good. Last question. If today would be your first day joining Chain.io, what would be the one advice that you would give yourself?
The advice I would give myself is, really study how supply chain works broadly, but then really technically in the underpinnings of data and analytics, like really understanding the flows. I came from a last mile delivery provider, so really understanding all the data flows that are required. Like I didn't know that 100 companies touched one shipment from Asia to North America. So that's my own shortcoming, but that's where I would spend a lot of time up front so that I came in with an understanding and knowledge. So
Very
just
cool.
get better is what I would say.
Appreciate that, Eric. Now, I think we pretty much, went through our question here. I want to give you the very last word. If somebody would be forgetting all that we discussed about Chain.io, what's the one thing that people should remember?
I want people to remember that we are solving business problems, making their supply chains more flexible, more elastic. So with our data model, they don't have to worry about the integrations. They should just be worrying about serving their end client. And that's the culture of our firm. That's the underpinning of our firm. And that's actually quite candidly why I joined and so proud of it.
Awesome. Very cool. Eric, we really appreciate you took the time to be a guest on Pathmonk Presents. We're looking forward to hear more about Chain. So thanks a lot for being a guest on the show.
Thank you. My pleasure.